Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Patrick McGilp and this is Paul John Dykes. We are waiting on John Hughes coming in as well. He's just doing a quick reboot. And in the meantime, I think Patrick and I will set the scene. Yesterday, you could hear the stirring of a cup of tea. This morning, I fluffed my lines. Patrick, we are waiting in anticipation. And I'm looking at Celtic news now and I'm refreshing it like many Celtic fans do. And I'm waiting for some kind of a statement from our football club. Are you disappointed, stroke surprised that nothing is forthcoming yet?
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, getting these guys to say anything in defence of Celtic or Celtic fans is, it's like drawing blood from a stone almost. I mean, we know the communication skills of Michael Nicholson. I was going to say they're lacking, but that would be putting it mildly.
That would mean that they exist in
That
some form. Patrick has
that's true. Maybe I'm giving them a bit too much credit at all, really. But no, I mean, you've seen from the Scottish media, the mainstream media, the sort of both side, narrative that has developed, the sort of old firm narrative, if I can use such a term, where, you've seen supporters on the park and of course both sides get blamed. Around the world, supporters who, it goes to extra time, it goes to penalties, you beat your greatest rivals in the most dramatic of fashions. I wouldn't put a number on it, but certainly a good few Celtic fans end up on the pitch. Most of them, I think, within the 6-yard or 18-yard box. I don't think that's a justifiable reason to have home supporters from all three sides of the ground, including the other end of the football pitch, to run on in anger looking for a fight. I don't think that is a both sides moment, personally. Obviously, a lot of people have been saying, the pitch is sacrosanct. You shouldn't really have anyone apart from footballers on it. I think that's fair enough. I think that's a fair point. But I mean, even in this context, you've seen Rangers supporters jumping onto the pitch at Firhill to say to celebrate getting third place back in 2017. So they are not, they are not without sin themselves in celebrating last minute goals or last minute victories. As I say, you see it all around the world. You've seen much more sort of enthusiastic and exuberant scenes in South American football, much greater than anything that we've seen on Sunday. I mean, the way that it's been described, this sort of riot or this sort of shame game of Scottish football, I think there were injuries in the single digits or just over 10. No sort of serious injuries. You'd think hundreds of people had died. The way that some people were sort of going on about this, and fair enough, the violence at football is obviously unacceptable, and really it should not be happening. Um, but in particular, the both sides narrative that we've seen play out, I've seen Alan Morrison share a good few links, and this has actually been sort of documented and studied in the Scottish football press. And it's just not the case. You had supporters coming on celebrating, and then you had rival fans coming on looking for a fight. And I think any neutral observer, that was clear to see. And obviously, as I said at the top, no surprise that we've not heard a peep from Celtic to defend, the club's position, because ultimately it's the club that's been criticised, not the collective or the Green Brigade or fan media or Celtic supporters. Well, I suppose it is Celtic supporters, but the club itself has also been criticised, and again, no communication whatsoever. So disappointing, but not surprised, to answer your opening question.
The thing is, Patrick, right? Everything you've said, and listen, I don't want this to be an echo chamber. You could verify you're not sent an agenda of any description when you come onto a Celtic State of Mind. And in actual fact, when you appear on that screen, you've not got a clue what we're going to talk about. The only clue might give you is the tagline to the show, which you may or may not have seen before you come on live. So we are just talking, and it's our opinions, our individual opinions. What I've seen in the last 3 days is that a lot of people that tune into a Celtic State of Mind and listen to us as well on the audio platforms. So you're probably talking on Monday, Tuesday, close to 100,000 people have listened to or watched our two shows Monday and Tuesday. And the vast majority of the feedback I'm getting is very much along the same lines as your opinion. And I share your opinion, Patrick. And we're in a situation at the moment where all I see is Celtic fans defending Celtic fans who may have set up a blog or a podcast or a vlog, or, you know, they might have a TikTok channel, whatever platform they've chosen to have, they are defending Celtic, right? And they're the same people that are not welcome at Celtic as members of this fan media title that has emerged in the last, let's say, 10, 15 years. But only fans are standing up for Celtic. And I think it's time, and I'll throw this right over to John, I think it's time that Celtic stood up for the fans, John, because at this moment in time, as Jungle Lyons already said this morning on the show, 3 days in, not a peep from a club who has departments who deal with media, PR, communications, yet they can't find one person to construct a statement or come out and actually speak up in support of the fans or the football club.
Yeah, just to be clear on what I've missed here, only fans are standing up for Celtic.
Perhaps. I don't know, John. That's beyond my scope of content consumption.
I know.
My disclaimer. My disclaimer's right in there.
Yeah. Look, the situation is, it really is just ridiculous. And you know, they're not coming out to say anything, I think, because they want to use this as they'll align this with another excuse to not let the Green Brigade in, stuff like that. So they're just not going to come out until they know for a fact everything that happened. But also, they just don't. They never have done. I mean, how many of these incidents have we had? You know, and have they ever come out and condemned anybody? When a coach get bottled, the glass and hearts, you know, even at the weekend there. I mean, you know, Sinisalo was on fire, but that's no excuse. I don't know why they were then throwing lighters at him for the whole game. So it seemed a bit confused. But Sinisalo was talking about just there's stuff constantly getting thrown at him. Mm-hmm. And this is not, you know, if you don't want to defend the fans, defend the coach, defend the players. Do you know what I mean? Who were involved in this, who had, you know, who were all caught up in it. If you don't want to, you know, if you are at such odds with the fans, which we know they are, that you don't want to defend the people that are going there and being subjected to that horrendous policing, which nearly got people crushed at the start, and then the failure of policing, which nearly got people attacked at the end. In fact, did get some people attacked. So, you know, they're brilliant at, you know, diverting kids into a wee narrow area where they nearly all get crushed to death. But yet, God forbid you actually have to protect people and do your job. No, that seems beyond them. So, you know, for the board to just be sitting there going, you know, whatever, we don't need to say anything. You do need to say something. People were attacked, you know, and people in your employ were attacked again. So please, you know, and it is only the fan media that's, you know, trying to control. Fortunately, the fan media is a lot noisier than it used to be. And a lot of these guys, some of the mainstream boys, the reason why that they're being so willfully oblivious is, first of all, they're partisan hacks, and secondly, you know, it gets them the clicks because they're annoying everyone for the most part. Yeah. But still trying to accommodate the blue pound. And as I said in my blog, they're like not the same blue pound that Craig White used to buy them. It has to be said, but it is, you know, the club. As a PLC, you have a duty of care to the people in your employ. Yeah. And you cannot just ignore assaults on many of them, threats on many of them, the incredibly dangerous position they were put in. You know, it's not enough just to shrug your shoulders. I'm sorry, Michael, but, you know, shoulder shrugging's not going to cut it at this. You have to address it. And it doesn't matter the Tom Englishes of the world berate you and tell you it's both sides. You have to stand up and say this isn't good enough. This is one of a pattern of events that have been occurring regularly, and you can go back as long as you want. And I did I wrote about it the other day, and we'll come back to that later. But, you know, again, the club have to do much, much better.
They absolutely do. Thanks everybody for getting involved. We're about 1,700 strong, and I'm sure that'll rise as the show goes on. Absolutely brilliant to see Yogi joining myself and Patrick in this discussion, and I'll bring up as many comments as I possibly can, whilst constantly refreshing the Celtic News Now app, which gives you an aggregation of every Celtic story out there online, and hopefully very soon that will include your very own blog, John. So before I get dug into some of these comments, tell us about your blog, which was launched in the last week, and where can we find it?
So I decided to, a lot of people would know some of my writing on Twitter and stuff. I decided to just sort of formalise that. And I'm glad I did, because even this weekend, I was able to write a lengthy blog about this subject that we're just talking about. And, you know, it gets some of the frustration out. You get to make your point in a coherent and, you know, logical way, and it addresses all of the things that you can't really address online. So, you know, it's sonofceltic.com. And I would very much appreciate if everyone could book that, Mark, drop in and see it. I'll be promoting it on my socials wherever I can. But if you could go to sonofceltic.com and throw in a wee, I think it's the second page you can sign up on. Need to get it to fix that. But anyway, I would appreciate all the support. You know, at some point in the future, I'd like to retire before I die. And you're all looking at me, so you know death is coming long before retirement as it stands. So, you know, big effort, folks. You need to make a big effort here.
John, well done. I love the amount of creative people that we have and have had on a Celtic State of Mind. I was just shouting out Amy Canavan last week for making the Scottish Cup draw absolutely brilliant. Not as entertaining as some in the past, because Amy is a professional and she's not steaming out her nut while she's doing the draw. Right, Paul McGurk, big shout out to you and your family, Paul. We shout out for your old man who passed on Sunday. Big Acsom fan. Yeah, that is really sad to hear, Paul. So, as I say, thoughts and prayers with you, your family, and everybody that knew your old fella, and I hope you're all well at this time. We've also got My Ball. To be fair, I'm bringing this up because we discussed this yesterday, right? And I think it's a point we need to discuss. To be fair, it's hard to stick up for fans, as a minority of them stormed gates, wrote vile graffiti and vandalised sections of the stadium. Sad but true. Well, I think it depends on how you view this, right? So yesterday and the day before, Kev was at the game. He spoke about, obviously, the issues getting into the stadium. And I don't think it's about trying to even it up and balance it up. There's a false equivalence ongoing at the moment with the mainstream media. There's a whataboutery. Honestly, it's sad to see, actually, out there just how to which lens people will go to try and balance the books here when it comes to one set of fans against the others. Before we move on, what I would say is the storming of the gates. It doesn't look good, absolutely, right? But in terms of someone actually being outside the stadium, as Kev was on Monday's show, he talked about this. There was a frustration. There was actually a crush risk as well. So I'm not going to say that all these people were storming the gates just for the sake of storming the gates, right? Because I've seen stories in the mainstream press where basically they're saying hundreds of Celtic fans were in the stadium without tickets, without any proof whatsoever. They're just throwing that out there because they're saying the same video as us. But then you speak to people who were at the game and who were outside those gates and how badly policed those gates were. So I'm not about to give them a trial by the kind of information we've been given on the mainstream media. The vile graffiti, yeah, absolutely vile, absolutely horrific. The club, as well as coming out and supporting our own fans and staff and players, should also come out and speak up about the vile graffiti. And I said this on Monday, and we should pay whatever it costs to mend whatever the damage is. There is an agreement, there has been an agreement going way back to the previous incumbents of Rangers, whereby there was always damage at Ibrox and Celtic Park during the old school derbies and the new Glasgow derby. There was an agreement. It was almost as if they didn't even have to pay each other because it evened its way out, right? And that was the reason back in the day there was the lockout. Remember, no Celtic fans were allowed in the stadium. Somebody flew a an aeroplane over the park. Hail, hail, the Celts are here. We drew one each. David Murray locked Celtic out. And in the words of the chairman at the time, Jack McGinn, treated Celtic like second-class citizens. There's an agreement there. This isn't whataboutery. This has been there for decades and decades. Whatever gets damaged and graffitied at Celtic Park will even it up. But the content of the graffiti was completely out of order and should be called out, absolutely. But it's not. It is a false equivalence here, Patrick. We can't fall into this trap that's been set to say, oh, you know what, everybody's as bad as each other. I'm sorry, that the evidence doesn't stack up, Patrick.
No, I agree with that. I mean, my experience, I was fortunate enough to be at the game as well on Sunday, and my experience was, I didn't feel I was anywhere near to a crush. I'm not doubting anyone else's experience. We were certainly, it certainly felt like a bit of a palaver, if I can call it that. I mean, we were parked up on Broomloan Road. I'm just looking at a map here, and we were all sort of filed onto the pavement. And I just so happened to be standing next to Joe Hart at the time, who was at the game.
And he recognised you.
An age. And it took an age for us to get through. You had a sort of narrowing. It was almost like an arrowhead of police, and they were only letting through sort of 20 or 30 at a time. And you had people coming from 3 different directions, I think, from both sides of Broomloan Road. And then there's another road, and it's not telling me the name of it on maps at the moment. But Celtic fans arriving from 3 directions, and they're only letting 20 or 30 through at a time. And so obviously people are sort of wondering what's going on, because there's no communication about why this is happening. And after you get through, it was like a game of pinball. You know, pinball, where there's all these sort of different things in the middle of the board. You had to hold up your ticket and walk through a sort of pinball of police officers and show every single one of them your ticket. And only then did you get into the sort of car park and then get into the stadium. So, fair play to anyone who managed to sneak through that. I have no idea how they've managed it, because it was absolutely, it was an experience to get through that. It must have taken us 20 or 30 minutes just to get through that sort of police area. And then obviously I'm not going to defend people trying to storm emergency exits or fire doors. I think it happened, or it was certainly meant to have happened once before at Tynecastle earlier this season, or was it Motherwell or something last season? I can't quite remember. But that's obviously unacceptable. And I agree with your point on the damage of the graffiti. I'm not going to say that, people using stickers or anything. I mean, you walk past any lamppost in Glasgow, you'll see a sticker relating to some sort of football club. But there's obviously unacceptable graffiti of other kind that was spray painted or sort of written with marker pen, and then a few chairs broken and stuff. I'm not sure about the assessment of hundreds of thousands of pounds that I've seen in the media. I'm not sure where they've got that figure from. I think someone's slightly exaggerating the costs there, but certainly to go back to that agreement that the clubs had sort of going back a few decades, where they pay for each other's fans' damage. I'm more than happy if the club want to come to some sort of agreement in that case. But I mean, what we are saying in the comments that you brought up there about Celtic coming out and defending the sort of the club's honour, defending the fans. We're not saying to defend every fan. Celtic fans have been sort of accused of several things and attacked in the media of, being just as bad as people who ran onto the pitch looking for a fight dressed as Spider-Man. The majority of Celtic fans did not do that, did not dress up as Spider-Man for the game. I certainly was not dressed as Spider-Man. All we are saying is to defend the honour of fans and the honour of the club, who acted, normally, properly, and just went out and, had a great time at the football. I certainly had a great time after Van Chara put away that penalty, let me tell you. As much as the game maybe wasn't a classic. But that's what we're looking for from the club. And then, any damage that was done to the stadium, obviously, we would cover that.
But yeah, I mean, the obvious thing is, right, so it's the riot that's the problem, it's the assault sitter's problem, it's the storm in the pitch, it's a problem. Did guys breaking through the gates when they shouldn't have, did that cause a riot? Did vandalism that couldn't be seen until after the game cause a riot? As vile as it is, did it cause a riot? Did the broken chairs, apparently that were now end, but they used the wrong one, what they saw in STV was for the Onion Bears, did that cause a riot? So, there's bad behaviour at football, because you get a lot of young fellas at the football. Some of them don't know how to behave themselves. And you're going to get bad behaviour. Stuff like the vandalism, that is one guy with a pen and, you know, a brain defect. I mean, what are you supposed to do about that? You know, that stuff like that's going to happen all the time. You call it out, you self-police it if you see it, and you call it out. And, you know, none of the rest of that had any effect on what happened. So let's not retrospectively go back and try and find all the bad things that, you know, Celtic fans might have done that had no impact at all on what the events that occurred on the pitch. It's just utter nonsense. And as part of this, you know, it is literally, there is video evidence. Is this now Trumpian truth twisting, which requires us to all, you know, it's the last order of the party, isn't it? You know, George Orwell, you know, do not believe the evidence of your eyes. You know, and that's where we are with it. That we are watching what happened and they're telling us something else happened.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we can all see what happened, right? Many people were there. We were all watching it. And what was reported after the game was utter nonsense, right? And I know you've covered some of this in the last few days, Paul John, but I did sort of write about it, and it's doing my head in. You know, because there was an obvious, this is like, you know, some guy that's been beating his wife for 20 years, right? And then his wife ends up beaten, and everyone's going, how did that happen? You wonder, what is the mystery here? How did that happen to that poor lady? Just, you know, there's no previous evidence of something horrendous happening. What, you know, it's just a mystery. What are you talking about? This has gone back. I mean, the first, you know, thing I was aware of, you're going back to 1965. My dad in the League Cup final. So my dad and Billy doing the lap of honour in the League Cup final after Dad scored 2 penalties to beat the Hordes, to beat the Dead Club 2-1. The Hordes weren't happy about it. They invaded the pitch. They assaulted the players. Though I think they were assaulting the wrong players, to be fair. A few of them got leathered, I think. Anyway, the result of that, so the FSA, as you would fully expect, ruthlessly punished the offending club by banning laps of honour for 10 years. They banned laps of honour. Not the Rangers, not the fans, didn't punish them, they banned laps of honour. And from then on, you're into the 70s and Barcelona, and they won that game, they still rioted. And then Ian Archer penned his quote, which still applies to this day, you know, a permanent embarrassment and occasional disgrace, still applies. And it's still valid because it keeps happening. In recent years, the list, I mean, someone put up a list in the thing, I couldn't even use it on my blog because it took up too much room. Do you know what I mean? Because it's literally, the list of offences is like a page long. And we're all sitting here supposed to be wringing our hands about how, what could have happened at Ibrox? Oh, it's a mystery. Let's work it out. Is there any evidence of stuff like this happening before? What's that you say? Pages full of it. Oh, well, that should be helpful in determining who the main suspects might be here. You know, so it's just utterly ridiculous. And stop me when I'm going on too long because I'm going on. So the idea, the whole thing starts with a lie and finishes with a lie. And the first lie is the old firm still exists. The first lie is we all have to listen to the lies of the broadsheets and broadcasters who tell us that we must indulge this fantasy of the Rangers identifying as the Dead Club, you know, and we have to do that because they had to sell the old firm narrative, because otherwise the Hordes might have walked away when Her Majesty's tax collectors dealt with them as they were supposed to be dealt with and finished them off. So You know, it starts with that lie. It starts with a lie. There's an old firm. It starts with a lie. There's some sort of relationship here that isn't completely toxic, and we want no part of, and we have never wanted any part of. Right. So there is no old firm. There is no dead club. Right. So, and then, you know, again, but they wanted to cling on to the sectarian, racist, and violent traditions of the dead club, and they have done it, and they have doubled down on it. And I'll come back to that about Kavanagh later. But this just, you know, we started the game. Nobody's mentioned it. We started the game, but you wouldn't know from listening to Tom English or anyone else. 3 stands full of people singing anti-Catholic sectarianism. Immediately.
And who orchestrated it? Who orchestrated
it? We do. So they acceded to a request. The club acceded to a request to play the long version. Yeah. I didn't know that until I listened to you on Monday, mate. I couldn't believe that when you said it, right? And that is just outrageous. You let them do the add-ons. You deliberately let them do the add-ons. You know, so, you know, the one, I'll finish off with this, but Kavanagh, whose wife, by the way, is one of those American Uber Catholics, the 49ers owners who are Uber Catholics, right? That's the company Kavanagh's travelling in. And now he's got to defend the signs of up with the Daniel Day-Lewis thing, you know, may by Christian God protect us from this Roman popery or whatever it was. But Kavanagh apparently then, according to Phil McGillivan, had some sources and reporting on this, as usual, and he was saying apparently Kavanagh got fully understood at that point, you know, what he was up against, and he wants to try and clean up the brand. That is the brand. The sectarianism, the hatred, it is the brand. That's the point. You can't clean it up. These are not 90-minute bigots. They are bigots who have a safe space for 90 minutes to expose themselves to the world, you know. And you're telling me that this is, oh, we're going to clean up the brand. What, are you going to buy Coke and then clean it up by taking out the fizzy stuff? You know what I mean? It is the brand. You know, how can you be that rich and that oblivious? You know, again, anyway, I don't have any strong feelings on it one way or another.
John, you're right. This hatred has been commoditised. It's been commoditised for years by the football club themselves, by the media. And as you said, they clung on to this hatred, because that's what it is, so that they could commoditise it even further, right down to the authorities, because they know that in relation to these 2 clubs that exist in Scotland, if they police them, they make money. There's profit. There's profit in reporting on them. There's profit in policing them. And that is exactly what they've done, John. And that's why, as a club, we need to be far, far stronger. Some tremendous points coming through, and I'm really keen to get as many of them up as possible. Orange Whip, there is a game on Saturday. We will talk about the weekend's fixtures as well. Trust me. I'll tell you something. Had the club come out and spoken and used their... they've got so many people at disposal, Patrick. This is what gets me, you know, in terms of a media team, a marketing team. They have a PR department. You know, they've got all of this, the head of communications, and there should have been a strategy from the moment this all happened at the weekend, whereby this is how we're going to manage this. This is how we're actually going to manage it. And I also see there being an opportunity at that stage as well, right, to have a togetherness and this unity that Brian Wilson spoke about weeks and weeks ago. But I've not seen any change with regards to that. There's maybe been a couple of meetings since then, whereby there's an opportunity to bring everybody together between now and that game, as Orange Whip says, on the weekend, and every game going forward. We're just not very good at this, are we, as a football club? Spotting the opportunity, being able to actually manage the PR properly. We just, I don't know what it is. Yesterday we spoke about incompetence versus self-sabotage. It's difficult to figure out which it is.
Yeah, it's I think it's definitely, I'm almost certain it's incompetence. Judging by basically every major decision we've made this season, apart from sacking Nancy on the 5th of January, it has been, it's got to be incompetence. And I think it's, what's the famous quote? Sometimes sometimes the simplest explanation is the most realistic. I'm butchering that, but sometimes the easiest solution is the simplest or something. I'll need to Google this afterwards. This is going to annoy me because I've got that terribly wrong.
Occam's
I mean,
razor,
I mean,
Patrick.
You can
Occam's
find
Occam's
it.
razor, that's the one. Jeez. So I think that is the case. It is a case of incompetence. I mean, I remember Brian Wilson calling for unity, and then you didn't hear anything for a month, and then he came out in early February and basically said, "Oh, well, we've been focusing on the transfer window." That'll be the same transfer window where we wanted to sign Mvuka on a 4.5-year contract permanently. I think you need to apply your focus elsewhere, Brian. I think whoever was scouting him needs to
George Weah's
stop short of-
second cousin.
Duped. Absolutely. What was his name again?
Ali Dia, wasn't it?
That was the one. Yeah, Southampton.
Can you really believe that I think it was 5 loan players we got, and Mvuka was the one that we wanted to sign permanently. He was the one where we had most of our conviction. Fair enough, we probably can't afford Araujo, which is heartbreaking in itself, but I mean, my God, that guy looks like a competition winner. No offence to him personally, but he is not a footballer. But I mean, it would be a nice opportunity to call for unity. And I did see, I think there was a meeting on Monday night. I don't know if it was with the Collective or the Green Brigade. It was sort of one of the two. I know there's a bit of overlap, but I seen a screenshot from one of the forums saying it was relatively productive, but there's still huddles and they're not going to get back in for Saturday. It's like it's just dragging on and on and on, and it is. I think the weekend there and just the week that we've managed to get through there, a draw in the league, a win at Pittodrie, getting through in the cup. It's a real chance, and possibly our last chance to really sort of kick on as a team for the rest of the season. We might be. I think we're odds on to win the cup. We've got St Mirren in the semi-final, Falkirk or Dunfermline in the final. Not easy games, but certainly a lot easier than what they could have been. And it's a really good chance for us to win a trophy. In the league, I've not given up hope at all yet. I think this weekend, a bit like every weekend, I think since Martin came back, is another big weekend because we've got a tough game, and then our 2 title rivals also have relatively tough games, so points could be dropped in lots of different places. So it really is a chance to kick on, but again, amateur hour. And I don't want to call everyone across the entire club amateurs are bad at their job. That's not the case. But certainly from the top, it looks like amateur hour based on everything we've seen this season. And certainly in the PR department, the silence that we've heard in the last 3 days is a bit mystifying. Well, I suppose it's only mystifying if you've not been paying attention to the rest of the season. But they really should have came out and said something. I mean, I remember at points this season we were sort of begging Nicholson to come out and just say something, and he still couldn't do it. So yeah, baffling but not baffling at the same time. But hopefully there's a really good atmosphere on Saturday. As the comments have pointed out, there is a game, a really big game. And again, we just need to go out and try and win the game. The Green Brigade won't be there, but 7,500 were in fine voice on Sunday, and hopefully the 53,000 will be in fine voice on Saturday because the team needs them again.
Big time. I mean, see, the other thing I've been considering here is life without ultras. And why am I considering that? Because at this stage, I don't know if the club are keen and open, the current regime are keen and open to actually go back to what became the norm for 20 years, right? And I've studied this in great depth because I think I've shared with you guys before that many, many years ago, I had this idea about writing a book on the Celtic ultra movement and how, there was a huge part of that for me, and people might correct me, that came from the German ultra movement, in particular from Sancta Pauli. And we spoke about the fact that, some of the fanzine boys were over for the German pre-season trip at that time in the kind of early 90s and just found themselves, as you do, John, when you're in Hamburg, at the Reeperbahn, and then falling into a pub called the Jolly Roger, and then discovering this team called St. Pauli and the ultra movement that they were already part of. So, I mean, I went over to Germany, met up with a couple of people, got friendly with them, brought them over to Celtic. They introduced me to one of the old head boys of the ultras and tried to get an understanding of what this ultra movement was all about, John. And what I took from it was it was completely different from the 1980s hooligans stroke casual movement, right? It was completely different. It wasn't about wearing the clobber and fighting and having rocks, and I don't know how many movies have been made on that. My personal favourite is either The Firm or ID, some of the old school ones, but there's been loads made about it. But the whole state of mind of the casual stroke hooligan movement was completely different, John, from what became the ultra movement. But what I've seen in the last, and I'm not including the Green Brigade in this, but what I've seen in the last few years is it's a resurgence of that hooligan element within some of the ultra groups in Scottish football. And I think we've seen that with the ultras from Rangers invading the pitch for violence at the weekend, John. So that line that I think definitely existed between the old school casual movement and the new ultra movement, it seems to have been blurred, and it's been blurred for some time now.
Well, that is very much the case when it comes to the Onion Bears boys. They've got no real interest in, you know, trying to put on a big display and supporting the club and all the rest of it. Their primary concern is to try and start a ruck, it appears, at most games, or at least they threaten to do so. So they are, you know, harking back to the days of the casuals. You know, I mean, if you're in an ultra movement, you know, again, you're wearing balaclavas to the game. Like, you're allowed in with balaclavas apparently, and you can just wear balaclavas to the game and, you know, openly hide your identity. Although I don't know how you openly hide your identity, but anyway, you hide your identity, and you know that no one's got a problem with that, and they all know where they sit, they all know what they're doing, you know. So what were the police thinking, you know, when those boys were, you know, looking to come onto the pitch, and all of a sudden they're all putting their balaclavas on? Did they think all their ears were cold or something?
Do you know what I mean? Facing them, John. They're facing the crowd as they do that.
Yeah. Again, it's like we said before. It's a complete mystery. How could that have happened? You know, and all these unidentified guys go onto the pitch. I mean, where did they start out from? Did they run in from outside, or were they in the stand, right in front of the cops? You know, it's just, you know, the leaps of logic we're expected to take to try and excuse all this stuff. It's just really, most of it is just beyond a joke. So, you know, there's definitely a disconnect there. And that's to be expected, because there's a disconnect in different countries. So St. Pauli do their thing their way. But I mean, if you go to the likes of Italy, I mean, some of the ultras there like basically run the clubs.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they can't do anything without the ultras' permission, because the ultras are tied. The ultras in those situations are tied to organised crime. Right. So, and, you know, it just depends. You know, the ultras in Turkey, you know, completely different thing. You could say the same for Brazil, all the rest of it. So each country has its own culture of it. And I think however it was started, it is expressed differently in different places. So, you know, Celtic have the Green Brigade, who are, you know, seem to be primarily concerned. They are not lawless or blameless, you know, by any means, but primarily concerned with enhancing the match atmosphere and supporting the club. And again, that doesn't mean there's no misbehaviour, but you know, to the best of my understanding and from what I've seen, they are not trying to start a fight with people during games or after games or all the rest of it. So, you know, but again, look, it is there'll be some sort of you know, explanation as to how this is Celtic fans' fault, and we've already seen that happening. You know, a few guys went on the pitch in celebration, and the Rangers fans had already done that for Fernandez's punch into the goal. You know, and you know, we managed to not run across and assault them. I don't know, how did you manage that, Patrick? Did you manage? You must have really restrained yourself, you know, because I know you're first man over the top when this sort of thing happens. So, you know, and then, but they run the length of the pitch and start assaulting people all over the place. And then there's that very hilarious bit of footage of the guy, the fan, when the players are going up the tunnel, going, screaming, look at your fans, and all you could see was Rangers fans like invading up the end, fighting with the cops and all the rest of it. Going, well, I can't really see our fans for all your fans in the way. So, look, you know, that it's been done to death at this point, obviously. But you know, you'd like to stop talking about it, but they're not going to. They're going to keep on making a thing about it, and then it's going to be, can we have fans in the ground, or we can't have away fans? You can't have away fans. Why not? What did the away fans do? So what are you going to see in the next game? Why don't you get rid of the home fans?
How do you police a cup final, John? How do you police a semi-final at Hampden?
It's just nonsense.
Yeah.
It's absolute nonsense, and it's a very deliberate, obfuscation of the facts. They're gaslighting us. It is very much, and then they throw in all this other stuff. And I had someone in my comments the other day said, we can complain about the racism and sectarianism from them when we stop singing IRA songs. And you're like, mate, that whole article that I wrote was about false equivalence. And you're talking about, yes, okay, I accept there might be plenty of people in our support who find that offensive, and it might offend other people, but that's offensive. And they tried a law with that, didn't they? And it didn't work. So offensive is not illegal, and I'm afraid that racism and sectarianism is very much illegal. And Rangers remain, I think, the only club who has been fined repeatedly for sectarianism and racism in European football, but not at home. Not at home, because obviously when you're in this, when you're in our wee goldfish bowl, apparently that doesn't count. But, Professor Sir Tom Devine said the other day as well, this is a systemic problem, a structural problem with a very niche and specific group of individuals who are the supporters of the dead club and the new club. It's specific to them. And the whole of football, it is specifically them that have this issue, and it should be investigated, according to Professor Sir Tom Devine, as a national inquiry, because it is not being dealt with by the police or by the authorities.
Correct. Instead of dealing with it, they commoditise it, and that's what's been happening for generations. Ian Boy, 1888. I'm a pensioner. I can tell you this poison is getting worse. Society is in a bad way. I agree with that as well. And the Hill Hunter comes in to say, the Hill Hunter sounds like a WWF wrestler from the 1990s. We need to see more press maturity and doing proper journalist work to report the root cause. Big shout out to some of the outstanding bloggers. We've got one on the show today who are actually doing exactly that, the Hill Hunter. And I think it's also time that the club spoke to fan media about getting them back into the stadium. Perfect excuse for the board to keep the GB out. They will be pleased, says Katie. And we've also got a few supporters of the channel. Jack Krauser, I'm going to read out some of your comment, but this is a pre-Watershed show. So even though you're supporting the show, we cannot speak about Andy Halliday's follicle state of play at this moment in time, or indeed what you think of Ali McCoist. But I will let the listeners and the viewers join up the dots. All right, there we go. We've also got Joseph McGonigal. Get John a bottle of water. Love it, John. You can rest easy.
By the way, I don't know anything about Andy's state of affairs, but I did mention in my blog the other day, I think I referred to Danny Role as having suspiciously substantial hair.
Great volume. Brilliant volume.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what he adds in there. Let us know, Danny, if you're listening. I know plenty of your fans do. Chef is Doff. PJ, can we move on from this nonsense of Sunday? Yeah, but you know what? It will be mentioned until the club come out and stand up for the fans.
But they're not going to move on, Paul John. It's going to be the mainstream press are going to take this and run with it, and we're going to be beaten with the old firm stick, and then they're going to say we're not fit to go back into a stadium where we caused. We were not the cause of the events that transpired after, despite what bad behaviour there was. It was not the cause of those events.
We've got to, I think, keep banging the drum. We absolutely do have to keep banging the drum. There is a whole load of big fixtures this weekend. We've also got the semi-finals coming up, and I've been saying as often as I possibly can, big shout out to Amy Canavan, who was involved in the draw. That was just tremendous to see that on the TV. But we have drawn St Mirren, Patrick, the other semi-final being Dunfermline versus Falkirk. That's like a derby. That's a derby, even though they're from different regions and different localities. That is treated like a derby. Neil Lennon could well be looking over the next game and thinking, will I be at Hampden to meet Martin O'Neill? We do have a tricky task ahead of us. St Mirren, I think there's a dynamic there in that Martin O'Neill should have been in charge of the last time we played St Mirren at Hampden Park. But also there's news this morning that they might be losing their manager to Aberdeen. How do you react to that?
It's probably of benefit to us, I suppose. I know they've not hit the heights in the league as they have in previous seasons, but he's obviously won them a trophy. Well, we all know that, as does Wilfred Nancy. And just you highlighted there the irony that Martin O'Neill could have and should have been in charge for the League Cup final. I know we're 5 points behind as it stands, but I've not given anything up. And in theory, you could have been going for a treble this season, as bad as we have been. I'm not taking the Scottish Cup for granted. I'm not taking the league for granted. I'm not taking for granted that Martin O'Neill would have won the League Cup final. But would have certainly stood a much better chance than we did on the day. So it's a funny old world, and I'm sure Martin O'Neill is thinking the same thing. But it's a tough draw. I think the bigger pitch helps us probably. I think them losing their manager will probably help us. Whoever they get in, I know the players will be the same, but I don't think the manager will be of a better calibre than Stephen Robinson. He's obviously worked wonders there. So as I say, it's a tough draw. St Mirren have been a bit of a bogey team for us in recent years. Tough team to play against. It's obviously a game that I think we should win. I think it's just over a month's time. It's probably going to be Sunday, the 19th of April. And as you say, you've got the prospect of either Falkirk or Dunfermline in the final. Falkirk are a really good side. I really like the manager. I think he seems like quite a good manager, quite a good guy. And I think they'll almost certainly be favourites. But the prospect of facing Neil Lennon in the cup final, I think, is terrifying for us all because, as we know, the Celtic Bob, Neil Lennon, and the Hampden Shivers are a sort of trio that we don't want to see joined up again.
Don't even suggest this. Don't even suggest this, Patrick. Come on now. You're taking that too far.
No, listen, anything less than 10-0 if we meet Dunfermline in the final would be unacceptable in my opinion. No, I'm only kidding on. But no, it's obviously, as I say, it's probably two tough games to win the cup, but obviously it could be a lot tougher. I mean, when you look at the draw and you think St Mirren, Falkirk, Dunfermline, you're not thinking, these are the top 4 best teams in Scotland. We've been a bit fortunate there, so tough game, but certainly a game that we should be winning. And then at the weekend, obviously, probably a tougher game. I know they lost to Dundee on Saturday, I want to say, and it ended a pretty good run for them. But they've got a great defensive record. They play great football. They've got a great manager. Interesting to see where he goes in the summer, in my opinion. Jens Berthalascu. But it's a must-win game. It's a weekend where I can see at least one, if not, a couple of the teams going for the title dropping points. It's not often I support Neil McCann, but this Saturday night I'll be supporting Neil McCann with every fibre of my being.
McCann's a man.
I think he is, and I think Rangers are about to St Mirren as well. So that must happen to them far too often, where they play teams without a manager. I mean, that's shocking. Hopefully he gives St Mirren the send off that they deserve and takes charge of one last game. But tough games. I think 11 games to go if we get to the Scottish Cup final. I think I'm right in saying that. And if we want to win the double, we need to win all 11 of them. If we want to win the league, we probably need to win 9 out of 9, in my opinion, unless Hearts really do collapse in a sort of major way. But I think Martin O'Neill is up for the fight. I mean, just look at the game at the weekend. 1 shot, 0 on target. And being in the ground, I don't know what it looked like on the telly, but being in the ground, I didn't feel as if we were getting battered by any means. I thought we were well in the game, and we obviously never get any shots on target. I didn't think they were phenomenal at all either. And then
I agree with you.
and win it in penalties. So it shows the mentality of the team that we're always up for a fight. Declan turned to me saying, for all their flaws, this team's definitely got heart and fight and are willing to go at the end. And it's definitely the Martin O'Neill effect. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. Especially missing McGregor and Tierney. I know Tierney's meant to be back at the weekend. McGregor's going to be out for a wee bit longer, but certainly getting to the international break, I think we've got we've only got 2 games before the international break, and then we can regroup. Hopefully, guys like Johnston are back, maybe 1 or 2 others, but it's going to be a tough run in. But I think we need to win 11 games out of 11 if we're going to win a league and cup double.
Can I just say that, yes, I mean, you're as complimentary as you can be of this team. They do have heart and fight, and they have managed to pull out a result, and that's a good thing. But, I mean, let's just keep it real. We were utterly abysmal, and we didn't get a shot on goal. I don't think there actually was a shot, Patrick. I know people have said that, but I think people have gone back and revised it. I don't think there was a shot on goal. That's not something I've ever seen in 120 minutes. That's a first for me, and I'm a pretty old guy. I don't remember ever seeing us going 120 minutes without a shot on goal. And we have played and been battered by some brilliant teams. And in this occasion, I'm afraid, it's just dire, but that's the position we're in. But, that works, and, that worked for a cup game. But in a league game, how's that going to play out? If we are genuinely, especially if Callum McGregor how long's McGregor out for? If it's an Achilles, it could be ages. It could be 4 weeks, 6 weeks. And what we're doing then, we're playing Luke McCowan, the man who should, the worst possible choice to play in that position. And he, and it looked like it as well on Sunday. That's exactly what it looked like. And he had an absolute wasting, so he was struggling. So it's not a good look for him. But again, some of the choices were a bit odd. And I know, for instance, we went with Scales instead of Sriracha. But I mean, I would have played Sriracha in the midfield if you're trying to replace Callum McGregor rather than playing Luke McCowan in a position to which he is not suited. So. And it's easy to be critical in hindsight, but we are a very poor side. Motherwell are not. So, we have, this is a big game, and I think it's going to be possibly the biggest challenge we've faced in the last few weeks. Again, because Motherwell are playing pretty well. They're a good footballing side, and they exposed us pretty badly the last time we played. And you certainly hope not to see that again. But we've gone beyond the bare bones in terms of how threadbare the squad is now. I mean, it's ridiculous how many people are out, and the little quality that we did have is all gone. And now we're playing with. I mean, having to bring on him, Vicar. I mean,
that shows you how threadbare it was, John.
I don't know. I don't know who scouted that guy, but basically, I don't think we should use that guy or his guide dog again.
The thing that I'm looking at, John, is that when you're looking at how threadbare it is, and you're looking and you're kind of hoping that some of these guys come back, so you're thinking, when's Engels coming back? Because we need him back due to the fact that McGregor's now injured. Does Bernardo get a start over Luke McCowan based on the performance at the weekend? Does there come a point, Patrick, between now and the end of the season when Martin O'Neill looks at the squad and says, I just don't have the players to play 4-3-3? I mean, does that point happen? Because if Johnson comes back, you want to be playing him and Araujo in the same team. Does Araujo play more of a overlapping kind of right-sided player? Do you do the same with Sriracha? Because if you've got Tierney and Sriracha, it's all about playing the best players. One of the things I noticed, and I took note of this, our wingers didn't touch the ball in the Rangers box until the 33rd minute. And I think it speaks volume because as an attacking force, we didn't exist, And you've got to look at the wingers and say, right, how productive are they? And if they're completely unproductive, maybe we need to try something else. We then had Liam Carrigan yesterday talking. He already knows Maeda's game. He had looked at Svinchara's game. And it's his belief that both players play best when they're part of a two. When Maeda's playing off maybe one of the bigger guys like Svinchara. Is this something that we will ever consider? Because we seem kind of rigid in terms of the shape, playing with the two wingers who are not very good and not creating much chances. Do we change that?
It's certainly something he's going to have to consider. I mean, you think the injuries are bad and then they get worse, really. It's incredible. I'm hoping that I think it is Johnston and Engels that are due to be back soon. I seen Johnston made an Instagram post where he was running. So hopefully he is back really soon. As I say, I think it is only these 2 games and then the international. And, maybe McGregor's back, maybe he isn't. Tierney's going to be back, Johnston back, Engels back, hopefully. It is a bit of a reprieve. But it's really hard to pick a formation when basically none of your forward players look any good. It's a bit of a shame. I mean, I know it was a big game, and you do have some people that just can't perform in these games. Yang certainly seems to be one of them. He, again, a bit like Mvuka, just a bit of an empty jersey, to be honest. Never really.
Did he get past the
involved
fullback
in the
and
game.
ping the ball in? I can't remember a moment that he did that.
No.
Not one moment.
We just didn't. We didn't look like an attacking threat at all. Luckily, we done okay defensively. But against Motherwell at home, you need to show what you've got. If the players in the team are used to 4-3-3, they know their sort of passing lanes, what positions they've to be in, what runs they've to make, and maybe that's why Martin is persevering with it. Then fair enough. But at the same time, I think you do have to play to people's strengths. And as you've said, if the players that we've got at our disposal suit 2 up top, if we've got a bit more control in the midfield by having a sort of 4-4-2 or 4 in the midfield, it's definitely something he's got to consider. I think defensively, apart from Carter Vickers, Johnston will be back soon. I think we look okay. It's just that attacking line. I mean, look at the games. 2-1 loss to Hibs. Last minute winners in the 3 games before that. I don't think we've won a game by more than a single goal since Martin O'Neill's first game back, or Falkirk 2-0 beginning of February. But we're not putting teams to the sword. We're not winning comfortably, and it's normally a case of waiting for the team to click. But I don't think it's going to be a case of that this season. You're just looking at getting games over the line because we really do struggle to score in almost every single game, and it's hard to watch at times. But luckily, under Martin and with the players that we've got, we have been getting over the line, and it's just about getting the right 11 into the right positions to get those 3 points, and by whatever means necessary. And I just don't know, based on the performance of almost every single attacking player, I'm not sure what that formula is. But obviously, we've got a 74-year-old Martin O'Neill and Sean Maloney by his side to sort of solve that problem, and hopefully they can do it at the weekend and every weekend from now until the end of May.
Without a doubt. I'm looking at that. Patrick said earlier on, John, that he expects someone from the top 3 to drop something. So the big question is, who do you think it's going to be? So the fixtures involving the top 3 are Kilmarnock versus Hearts. That's going to be your Saturday night fixture. 3 o'clock kickoff is Celtic versus Motherwell. And then on the Sunday, you've got St Mirren versus Rangers at 12 o'clock. Do you agree with Patrick? Do you think one of the top 3 will drop anything? And if so, who's dropping points for you?
I think Hearts might drop points. Who did you say Rangers are playing again? Sorry,
St Mirren on the Sunday.
Yes. Sorry, we were talking about that earlier, weren't we? There's old man's memory for you. But I mean, they could both drop points, and I certainly hope they do, because there's a better than even chance that we will. And again, it's great to have all that fighting spirit. Defensively, again, we look sound, but even, for instance, Araujo has been inconsistent, and although he was better defensively on Sunday, he was responsible for basically leathering the ball up the pitch a load of times we couldn't hold on to it. Austin Trusty was magnificent, but we've seen Trusty do that before in games where he's back to the wall. Mm-hmm. He was also playing on his correct side for the first time, I think. I don't think has he ever played on the left. So that was all good. Sinisalo was fantastic. That's really positive, because especially with Scales' comments afterwards, going to write a bit about that later. And I felt exactly the same way. A goalkeeper commanding his box. When was the last time we saw that? I mean, Joe Hart, for all the fact I love big Joe Hart, he was rooted to the line almost as much as Casper. I don't know if that's something that happens when they get older. They're just scared to come out, or maybe it's just experience. It tells them not to go out. But, I mean, Sinisalo really did a tremendous job of commanding his box and playing sweeper, at certain occasions. He was real switched. I was super impressed by him. So I think he's got to be. Well, I made the comment. I think he's got to be in surely. And then someone pointed out that Martin O'Neill previously dropped the brilliantly performing David Marshall for a grab. So Martin's not got a great record there. So let's just hope things have changed in the intervening years. But again, you know, I'm always sort of hyper focused on us. I think there are many twists in this tale to come, because I think that was a devastating blow for Rangers in the last 2 games against us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have spent a ton of money. In fact, someone was pointing out today, I think it was Alan, was pointing out that their net spend this year is more than we've ever spent net. So they have spent a ton of money and they cannot beat this dreadful Celtic side. And so, I mean, from them, and after that game, surely that's got to affect them psychologically. And Hearts will be all buoyed by that. But I just don't believe Hearts have got the quality to persist. But then again, who does? That's the whole point, isn't it? Who does? Because I wouldn't say any of the 3 teams are great.
I think there's a lack of quality there, John. You're spot on. And I've said before, I do think it comes down to the mentality and the experience, the winning mentality and the experience of the 3 managers. And I think if you were to have a poll as to who is going to keep who's got the mettle, who's going to keep their cool, I'm going to say Martin O'Neill of the 3. Thanks everybody for getting involved. I know that we did labour what's been happening at the weekend quite a bit, but I think it's important that we keep banging the drum because the club don't seem as though they're prepared to do so. 2,700 plus strong on the live stream. Thank you all for getting involved. Give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. A week on Friday, Joe Ledley's coming up from Wales and we're going to be joined by Callum Mulgrew. We keep getting requests to go out east, and I think Musselburgh is classed as somewhere in the east of Scotland, is it? I think so. So we're going to be in Musselburgh with the Trinity CSC. Few tickets left and the link is under this video. All that's left for me to say is come back tomorrow at 12:30. And thank you to Patrick and John for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Yeah.